thank everybody for coming out tonight to our event. My name is Alexander Dawes. I will be your moderator for tonight. I'm a second-year medical student at the Medical College of Wisconsin, and I'm also a mentor here at Teach As You Learn and a member of our curriculum team. So just some announcements. At the conclusion of tonight's event, we will have a study with me, so you can just stay logged on, and JR will take over and kind of make everything available for us to get some work done. Some upcoming things to be on the lookout for. We will have our URM in medicine panel on November 12th. Time still to be determined. Then we, as always, as you're going through interview season, make sure that you check out the resources we have on Teach As You Learn, especially because interviews are so pivotal to make sure that you get to that next step and get that acceptance. So for tonight, we're going to cover a little bit of everything from third-party resources to medical student finances, how to handle hardship, time management, navigating residency, and then we'll just ask at the end that you fill out a feedback form to kind of let us know how we did.
So I'll start by saying I didn't use many third-party resources right in the beginning. I just kind of let myself adjust to my actual school and their resources. But now that I am a second year, I'm definitely using a lot more of the outside resources to kind of prep for step one boards and everything. And I think it's just trial and error, kind of seeing what resources you vibe with and what works with the way that you learn. So for me, I chose to use Anki pretty much all of last year, and now I'm using more of like the video-based things like Sketchy and Boards and Beyond. I basically just kind of looked up what was out there and then watched like a sample video or did a sample question or a free trial of a couple different things to see what kind of would work best for me, and then just chose one and stuck with it. I think that's kind of the key, is trying not to get overwhelmed by how many options there are and checking them out and then picking one and just going with it, because everybody's doing something different, but you kind of have to see what works best for you.
It's like one quick thing, and anyone else can add after me too, is I think I use literally the exact same things that Juliana does with like Sketchy, Boards and Beyond to like learn material, and then Anki to like review material. I think that there's find like a resource that you can like use for like actually learning the stuff, something for you can use to like retain the information, and then usually like a resource for like practice exams or something like that. And usually think of it like that, then it's a good way to kind of avoid that resource overload kind of stuff. Boards and Beyond and or Sketchy for like learning, Anki for reviewing, and then like UWorld or Amboss, those kind of things for like practice exams. But then you don't have to feel like overwhelmed with like, oh, so many people are using all these different things. We just get like one in each category, you'll be good.
And so with that, I'll ask my next question. What is the best way to utilize these third-party resources? Should I use them as just an addition to class, or should they be a primary source of where I'm going?
I would suggest utilizing as a second resource for the class. And especially during the class, I would say like, of course, study the material for that course, but also cross-reference to see what's mainly high yield, especially for boards, part one or step one for y'all, or whatever. I feel like that helped me as far as in passing. And especially utilizing like Anki for Sketchy for micro portion, that helped me a lot.
Anybody else have it?
I can add on to that. Yeah, I would definitely agree. I think it'd be best to use third-party resources as a supplement to what you're learning in your coursework. Now, I guess I do know people in my class that have solely relied on third-party resources to get through, especially if they're really focusing on like doing well on like step one and step two. But it's my opinion that with them being pass fail, or step one being pass fail, and a lot of preclinical curriculums being pass fail, I think it'd be best interest to probably like just use that as a supplement in addition to your classes. But definitely feel free to look up third-party resources to help explain certain things that didn't make sense before, because a lot of times they can do a better job than explaining them than your own lectures. And also I'd add to some schools, depends, like may offer subscriptions or free access to some of these resources. If not, one strategy is to like get multiple people to maybe go in on a particular like subscription to help share the burden of that, because they're very expensive. And pretty much do what you can to help get access to them.
Yeah, I'll just add on one last point to everything that was said. I think part of the answer to this question will also depend on the format of your classes. Some schools like Maya will use NBME exams for a lot of your finals in the courses. Then other schools, you're going to have in-house exams. So don't be that student where you have an in-house exam and you're listening to all the third-party resources, and then somebody's asking you what's the third branch of this artery that Boards and Beyond didn't cover. So that's just something to keep in mind.
Perfect. And then now we have a question. Can you compare studying for the MCAT to test in medical school? What has changed with your study habits?
I guess I can start off on this one. I think the MCAT, studying for the MCAT and studying for like the NBME exams are kind of similar. There's a logic to the questions. There's a certain structure now that NBME is really trying. I would say though that another similarity is like the intensity. One of the things about med school isn't necessarily the difficulty of content, it's the pace of the content. So you're always in this race to kind of get more and more. So I think the similarity is more in the pace, and then sort of like the routine structure to programs through which just repeated practice questions gets you the same way, just like with the MCAT.
And then JR, how do you study for NBME exams when a lot of material isn't taught in school? For example, this participant saying that they're expected to know about cystic fibrosis, but there aren't many questions to find on content like this.
I think like studying for NBME exams, I think the most important thing is like using like the third party kind of things, primarily like practice test ones like AMBOSS or UWorld, whatever your preference is, because that will give you, and then also like of course the like forms that NBME provides for their like shelf exams depending on like where you are, and I don't think they have them necessarily for just like NBMEs, but like for shelf for your clerkships and stuff. Like using all of those will give you a good insight on like the actual questions that you'll be asked on the real deal. And so using those, I think I was probably the student like in the opposite almost of, you know, what like Emerald and Blake and like Noah mentioned. Like I was somebody who like rarely did class stuff, but it was because like Noah said, our finals were NBME. And so that's just the way that my nature, I would have been very different if we had in-house exams. So like I agree with everything that's been said so far, but because it was NBME exams, my prep was towards resources directed towards preparing you for NBME stuff. Because there's like there's a split, right? Like your school is not like their primary purpose isn't preparing you for the exams. Their primary purpose is to prepare you to be a good physician. And they have secondary purposes that help you for the exams and stuff. But using other resources that have the primary purpose of preparing you for NBME exams, like if your goal is to prepare for the NBME exam, learning that material is going to be higher yield or better for you for that purpose. So I think if I'm understanding the question right, just like how do you really focus on NBME type things, and it is using the resources where that's like the primary purpose for those. And sometimes like lecture slides from your school and stuff won't necessarily be that.
Okay, perfect. So next we'll kind of move into some more things about finances. So first I'll start with Juliana. How do you manage your finances as a medical student?
I think this is kind of one of the scariest things about med school, at least it was for me. The debt is insane. So I try to budget like as best as I can. Especially last year when I was first starting out, I did a whole spreadsheet and everything to kind of keep track of how much I was spending and making sure that I didn't like run out of my loans before I got the next disbursement, which definitely happened the first semester, which was not fun. But I think trying to just stay aware of how much you're spending on different things, especially when you first start, can help you kind of realize, where am I spending too much that I could kind of cut down. Because definitely most of us are going to be on a tight budget during med school. So it's just really paying attention for me. And then also living with roommates, keeping rent kind of as cheap as possible. For me, I live a little further out of the city than where my school is, where it's a little bit cheaper. So just general things like that. It's a med student budget for sure, but hopefully it works out. We'll see.
Next, I'll open this up to anybody who wants to answer. Can I work during medical school?
It depends what you mean by work.
Yeah.
And okay. Med school, to be clear, is a full-time commitment. There's no world in which you can have like a full-time job and do med school. Now, can you do gig work? Absolutely. Can you tutor? Absolutely. Those are things that you can do as long as you make sure, your studies are your priority. But I would caution against taking on too much, especially in your first year.
My only suggestion would be if you are tight on money. I know starting my first year when I went back home, I was able to get a job just for like the winter break. I mean, that was about it. I just think that's more realistic if money is tight. Another strategy that I utilized whenever I first got, like, of course, my student loans, just pay up your rent for that semester so you can kind of allocate your money to see what can you spend and what you can't. So I feel like that also helped me as well. And yeah, I think that helped a lot.
Yeah, no, I love that plan, because like for a lot of people starting med school, they may have not been like really over handling their loans. Parents a lot of times do that for kids in college, or they don't have them in college, or whatever the case may be. So for a lot of times, it's like for a lot of people, it's different to have a lump sum of like tens of thousands of dollars in your bank account, like at a single point in time, and then you feel like you really out here, like, I'm finna go to the steakhouse, get dinner, don't even like go to the movies, right? You could do that for a few weeks and you feel like, nothing's changing in your bank account or whatever. And then you get towards the end and like then you get to kind of like, trying to survive, and you don't want to do that. And so I like that idea of like, if you can pay rents like multiple times, like, multiple months, at a time, like that's solid. Or at least like making sure that, like what Juliana had, like budgeting down in a spreadsheet, like this is how much of this lump sum that's going to be gone towards this and whatever. I think is huge. I was just quickly touch on the point too of like working, like that's, I think a lot of people try it, and even like that's what I try to do with like content, right? And it's definitely something where it's like in spurts of time, you may have time. In some clerkships you might have afternoons, and some like courses it might not be that busy or whatever, but like your time still isn't your time. And so you can't like have other commitments that are also when your time is not your time. Like they have to be things where it's like, oh, I actually can just, this weekend I have off, I'm gonna go and do something like, gig work, tutoring, something, if you have a camera taking somebody's photos, those kind of things like people do and they can do well, and people who like are inclined to do that. I think historically the notion is like you can't do anything outside of like medicine and medical school and stuff like that, and like it's partly true, but I don't know, my personality is I like to kind of like promote people being able to like do the other things that they're interested in, especially like if you can benefit financially from it. But I think it starts with understanding like your time's not your own, and if you have to get called into the hospital or whatever, you're on call or things like that, like you can't know like, oh, actually I have to wake up at 5 in the morning because so and so needs something, and you already have the hospital needing your time, so you can't have another employer. It has to be self-employed stuff.
Perfect. And I'll pose this question to the panel as well. How can you put your best foot forward when applying to outside scholarships? How do you set yourself apart?
I maybe could touch on this. So I applied for an outside scholarship, like a kind of small one, and was fortunately awarded it. But it's kind of scholarship dependent. But what's nice is I feel like it depends on the scholarship, but like you can kind of help draw things from your medical school application to put in your scholarship application, and it might help save you a little bit of work, and you can apply for more scholarships that way, to make the best use of your time. And then one thing I also wanted to add real quick about previous point, when you're in med school, you'll see like people that take like very extravagant trips and go like places like left or right, or and people on Instagram, and all this like crazy stuff, and then it's very easy to compare yourself to them and think like, oh man, I can't do all that things, it's just not my budget ability. And it's a common thing among students, and it's it's something that everybody through, and everybody has their own path, and it'll totally be fine. You'll get where you need to be. And yeah, just try to like stay in your own lane. Yes.
Perfect. Anybody else?
What I will say about the like scholarship thing is like apply to those things. So many, there's a lot out there, and they're like not many people do them, because like it's one of the things where it's just like, oh, this is like another thing, like whatever, like it's fine. Like that's the mindset of 90+% of medical students, myself included, for almost all of these. And I've actually seen a few of them, because I'm interested in like the building scholarship kind of thing. So I've actually talked to a few of these like scholarships, like the people who give out the scholarships, and they're like very like 100 people or so will apply for like a pretty like solid chunk of change. And so I definitely would send out as many as you can, and use what Blake just said. Like you already have all your essays for everything written. Like you can like make little changes or whatever, but if you have your med school essays, whether it's like personal statement related, secondary essay, you can answer any question in any of these scholarships. So I just would like plug and chug and send them as many as you can, because you'll probably get something.
With that being said, when is the best time to apply for scholarships?
Yeah, I don't know if there's a particular best time. They're pretty much, you can find a scholarship at almost any point throughout the year, to be honest, with a lot of these outside scholarships. If you're an undergrad, a lot of times your pre-med office will send them out. I know my undergrad did. They'll be like, hey, there's this scholarship to do, if you want it. So I would just keep a lookout in your email and inbox, and to be honest, you can just Google search a lot of them, and you'll find a bunch of stuff.
Perfect. Moving on, we'll talk some more about how do we handle hardship. So what are some challenges you have faced? And I'll let anybody on the panel wanting to answer that.
I can start off with a cliche one. A cliche challenge that medical students face is time management. Like JR said, like medical school is not your time. So I think the hardest part, and especially maybe coming from undergrad, I came straight through, was, I'm used to like, I have my classes from like 9 to 12. I made my schedule that way. I'm like done the rest of the day. In medical school, that's like not the case a lot of times. You're in a clinic or you're in an anatomy lab. So it's kind of like finding a balance between, school and then doing activities that I want to do, and then like activities that my family or my fiance might want to do. So having all those competing interests can be hard. a lot of people, and a lot of people move away for undergrad, but almost certainly for medical school, because not every state has a medical school. You'll be moving away. So I think that was a challenge for me. I stayed in state for college, and being away from family, and now family members are getting older, people are sick. And it can be a challenge, not being there when family members are going through hard times. Just keep in mind that you'll be there soon, or make sure that you check in on your folks. You know, don't become distant. Keep in touch with your family members. It's important for them, but it's also important for you.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I can talk to. I feel like this is like a really good question that I mean, if whoever else wants to talk, I think we can like spend some time on it if anyone else after me too wants to give some challenges. But definitely second everything that Noah said, experienced very similar things. I know for me, like my primary challenge is like feeling pulled in, for me particularly, like two different directions with like a family. So like my thing is like, a wife and kid at home, and then like professional goals and things like that. And in medical school, things are trending in like pass fail nature, things in this kind of thing. So like you can really like make how hard you go, like it's a very like personal decision. And when you have that and you have like something else, competing potentially for like your time, it can be hard to say like, I really want to go really hard in this, but then I also don't want to like, not see my kid, or like, have my wife, not hang out with my wife today or whatever. And so with actually in an environment where you can go as hard as you personally want to, for the most part, as long as like you're passing your stuff, it's kind of like everyone's like comes in pretty like type A, I'm used to getting 90+% on things and crazy scores and all this kind of stuff. And then now when like a 70 is the same as like a 99, are you going to be like as motivated? And if you are as motivated, how are you going to balance like, oh, I actually really want to learn this and really, really perform here, or like stay late in the clinic so that I can, get good reviews and stuff. But also like, I kind of told my wife that I was going to be home for dinner and stuff. Also don't do that. Because like your time's not your own, like we've talked about multiple times, and that's just setting yourself up for failure. So, but it's just like, it's like a real thing, especially when clerkships come. Like, it's just like, I don't know, because at least in class, there usually is like a time where like things end, but in like clerkships, it's like, I could easily stay late. It's in my surgery rotation. I need to honors this because I'm going into a surgical specialty. Like, I'm just going to stay late, or whatever. I'm going to like try to get there really early. And you have a lot of like competing things. So for me, that's probably what's been most challenging for me.
And on that topic, how do you work through those difficulties?
I can kind of touch on both a little bit. I think what everyone said is so true, and I think things that we all kind of struggle with in terms of like the time management and being pulled in a bunch of different directions. I think for me, the biggest challenge and kind of realization that I came to in med school was you can't do everything. There are a lot of different directions you can go in medicine itself, and then we all have family, we all have friends, we all have lives outside of medicine too. So there's just so much that I feel like I want to do that I'm not able to, and I think kind of realizing you have to say no sometimes in order to be able to give more of yourself to the things that you're already involved in is really difficult, especially I feel like a lot of us, we've always been doing a lot, had a lot on our plates, but at med school, I definitely have had to put like a hard stop and be like, no, I can't take on anymore right now, because I still want to be able to call my family on the phone or go on a trip on the weekends or whatever it might be that's outside of medicine. And even within school, being like, no, I can't like sign up to be part of this club or try to be a leader in this activity or write another paper or whatever it might be. Just learning how to say no and kind of realizing you have enough going on has been hard for me. But I think knowing that pretty much everyone else I know is on the same page and like feels the same way, like you never feel like you're doing enough, or there's so many cool opportunities and you just have to say no sometimes. I think what kind of gets me through that is knowing that most of my friends feel the exact same way. Like, we all can't have it all, can't do it all at the same time, and sometimes you have to kind of pick and choose. So that definitely was a challenge, but I think being in it with everyone else is helpful.
And one thing I want to echo everything that Bria said. Also, do not neglect your mental health. Go see a therapist. If a lot of medical schools offer therapy, mental health resources. If not, that there's some like low cost resources in the community. Please do that. Realize you're not alone. I faced a lot of challenges like transitioning from undergrad to med school. Started seeing a therapist, on medication, and doing a lot better. And so I think it's something that it's not talked about a whole lot, but it's really important that taking care of yourself, talking to people, being open about challenges is really important. And I think is setting those habits now, doing that will set yourself up for success throughout your medical career and throughout life in general.
Anybody else? Okay. Well, one of the questions that has come in is, how much sleep did you get on average each year up to now in medical school?
I can speak to the first 2 years, and this is just me, but I never compromised on 7 to 8 hours of sleep in first 2 years. Like, okay, I have the rest of my life to not sleep, including next year when I start clerkships. Don't start in first and second year. Get your 7 or 8 hours. That extra 5% on the test ain't worth it, y'all. I'm sorry.
100%. I can touch on the second 2 years then, because they're definitely different than the first two. First two, you can for sure get your sleep in if you want, and I definitely recommend you wanting to. Third year's tough, and it's really like clerkship dependent. All this is really like timely dependent. It's like time dependent, or like season dependent, wherever you're in. Like during, at least like at Mayo, during like just the surgery clerkship, like when you're on like your HSS service, you'll be there very early. And so like sometimes like you have to be at the hospital at like 4:30, and then you're out at like 7, and then sometimes you're still trying to like study for your shelf exam or whatever. During like finals weeks, you're limited a little bit because you're probably like up studying later than typical. And so like it's similar to undergrad, honestly, where there's going to be seasons that you're just busier than others. It probably, like for me at least, it decreased as I got like through, like, so like the beginning of fourth year, like sub-Is is probably like the least sleep that I've gotten like regularly, just because these are basically like month-long interviews. So like you actually like really, and if you're like on an away rotation, there's like, I'm not really even coming home to anything other than like myself and like somebody's like apartment that I'm renting out for the month. Like, so I'm just like staying in the hospital, working longer hours and stuff like that. So yeah, it really depends, but on average, probably during third year, I probably was still sleeping like 7 hours. During sub-Is, I was probably sleeping like 5 or 4 or not, but those are temporary seasons and like 2 or 3 months of it being like that.
Anybody else? Okay, another question is, how do you keep up on top of all the material in medical school? I want to do well, but also have a life. I'm also a slow reader.
I would say, it's not true at every school, but most schools now are pass-fail for the preclinical, and that makes a world of difference. It's so different than when we were in college trying to get the best grades possible. I think taking a healthy advantage of that is definitely key to kind of making sure that you can stay on top of things but also have a life. I personally, like, also touching on the sleep thing, I don't study at night. Like, I don't think I've ever in med school, except maybe like twice, have studied after like 8 p.m. I just like refuse. I'm like, that's my one thing I'm not willing to compromise. Like, I need to have at least a little bit of like wind down time at night and like a reasonable amount of sleep. So the only times I haven't gotten enough sleep are like I stayed up too late watching TV. So that's on me. But definitely I think remembering that things are pass fail, if they're pass fail for you, is really important, because it's never going to feel like you know everything you need to know, and you just won't. You just can't. Like, there's not enough hours in the day. So kind of picking out what you're going to focus on and what you're going to study for that day, and just keeping in mind, like, you need to get a 70 or whatever the pass rate is. I think it's definitely much more doable than I thought it would be before I came into med school. Like, staying on top of things and being able to pass, it fluctuates. I just finished my neuro block, which was definitely one of the tougher ones. But there are plenty of other blocks where I feel like I had much more free time. I, do fun things on weeknights. Like, it's not constant grinding. It's just, it comes and goes.
I would have to say what helped me was, I guess, like reviewing material prior to class. And then I just feel like that kind of helped speed up the process for me during studying. I do study at night. I'm like one of those people that'll stay up late and study, yeah. But I feel like that did help me. I feel like they helped me study as well. Also, another thing is, I would say just know how to prioritize which class is more important. Like, for example, like pass fail, like she stated as well. But yeah, that's just one of my piece of advice that I suggest.
That's a great point too, Emerald, about trying to stay like a day like ahead. Like, that's what I did too, especially during like pre-clerkships, where it's like kind of like a regimented schedule. It's like super helpful. And I'm similar with like Juliana. I can't study like at night, but it's because I like wake up super early. So I just think it's important. One thing is just to like know yourself. And I know the person who like wrote the question said that they're not like a fast reader. So like, don't read. Like, I don't read. I know that that's not going to be like the most like effective and efficient way of me absorbing material. And for like some people, it will be. The literature suggests not to, but I'll like, if that's your jam, reading textbooks and things like that, like, that's your thing. But if it's not, you don't have to like force it. And I think that there's like, in like the traditional school sense, you're like taught like this is how you learn, but it's like a very like personalized experience. Like, learning is a very like personalized thing. And if you're someone who feels like, you experiment with yourself, like self-experimentation is like a dope thing. Like, right, like read a chapter on a topic and then listen to a video on the topic and then see like, where did I feel like I actually like learned more? Like, for me, like 10 times out of 10, it's going to be like watching a video on it. And so if you're not like a reader, like, that's perfectly fine. You don't have to be like a reader to be in medical school. I don't even read books. I like listen to Audible. Like, it's just like, that's that's how I do. Like, so I'm similar to whoever asked the question. And I think, yeah, to answer it, it's probably just going to be more of like reliance on you self-experimenting to see what's best for you. But for me, for that non-reader, watching videos and reviewing using Anki, like, I'm good. If I do those two things, like, I know I'm going to have the material down, or at least have the recognition of what the question's asking for, so then I can piece it out on test, even if I don't even know what it's talking about.
Next question. I know some people hit on things being pass fail, but how do we know something's truly pass fail? People see that there are things like high honors. What does it mean when people say truly pass fail?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So pass fail, and what people mean by truly pass fail, and usually most schools that refers to preclinical curriculum. That means truly the only two grades you can get. You can get a pass or you can get a fail. Sometimes there'll be pass with remediation, like Mayo has that for its preclinical courses. High honors is usually clerkships. So clerkships, there's usually a tier grading scheme. It'll be just like it was in high school, college, like A, B, C, D, F. You know, you'll have high honors, like pass, fail, and that's typically what people are referring to. And it's usually the clerkship years nowadays. There's a couple of schools that have true pass fail for clerkships, but those are exceedingly rare and are usually your top 10 schools.
And I'll add just one quick thing too with that. For like people who are applying like right now and you're considering programs and you're getting like acceptances and things like that, a fair question is to ask if there's like internal rankings and things like that, because that also kind of plays a role into this idea of like true pass fail. Because at the end, we just had like I think, I don't know if everyone calls it the MSPE, but it's basically like just a summative document that your like dean's office will put together, basically saying like summarizing your academic performance. And if you like have internal rankings but everything's pass fail, like, and you don't know that, then you could just be getting 70s on everything in passing, but then at the end they may say like this student was in the like blank percent of the class because they were actually like keeping track with like percentages on things. So a lot of schools I think are moving in the direction of like actually like legitimately just being pass fail, like the actual numbers not really mattering. And then like Noah said, like when you get to the clerkships, even those are actually trending in pass fail, which is really crazy. But coming from someone who had to like not have pass fail, I get sometimes jealous of people who just have everything pass fail. But it's going to be like program dependent, and because things are changing and because trajectories are changing, those are fair questions to ask. And so yeah, for the people who are applying right now, like ask how the clerkships are graded, ask if there's like internal rankings, ask those types of questions.
And then further along the lines of talking about class, now that we're in 2023 and some schools, organizations have returned in person, can each of you share what your respective school is currently doing, in-person classes, etc.? I'll just preface this by saying every school is going to be different. My school, we don't have to go to class. It's changing with the new curriculum a little bit. And we're being penalized as guinea pigs to some extent, but to be honest, most of our things are virtual. We actually get mad as students when we are asked to come to campus in our preclinical years. It's a very funny thing, but most people do class from home if they do class at all.
Yeah, so I can talk about Mayo as somebody who just went through the curriculum and just as COVID was ending. So first year, things were hybrid for the most part. You could come in person if you wanted to for a lecture. You could stay on Zoom. Some things were mandatory in person, like the R10 frames. So frames was like our clinical curriculum. You had to go to those. If you were seeing patients, you had to go to those in person. Anatomy was kind of a unique course in that it was mostly all virtual except for the anatomy lab. And now as things are starting to transition, I think it's going to continue that way of being a hybrid of in-person and virtual. I think it's convenient for everyone, but we'll see. But I wouldn't be surprised if most schools are going to start trending towards in-person attendance for most things going forward, even if it was virtual during COVID and the years after that. So if you're watching this in like sorry, it's probably back in person.
Yeah, I'll just say for us, kind of as another data point, we do have the option to go to class in person every day pretty much for like the normal lectures, but the vast majority just watch those recorded. It also depends on the block. Like we can have a lot of, like my upcoming block is hematology oncology, and we have a ton of mandatory classes for that because we do a bunch of like small group learning and like problem sets and stuff, like doing cases and stuff like that. And then our anatomy was all in person, and we have like our clinical experiences. We do this like once a week thing that's all in person in like a primary care office. And I think pretty much what they're doing now for us seems to be what they're going to stick with, where all the lectures are recorded. Most people will watch those recorded and not go in person, but then we do have typically at least like 2 or 3 days where we have to go to campus for like mandatory stuff. But again, it depends on the block and the school.
For Michigan, our first year curriculum is almost exactly the same as Juliana's. We have all of our main lectures are all pre-recorded, so you can watch them at your own pace. And then we have, depending on the block, like whether if it's like basic sciences or if it's more clinically based, you can have small groups where you do case-based learning. We have like our like standardized patient experiences. They're all in person. All of our anatomy labs were in person. So yeah, I'm pretty similar to Juliana.
This question is actually for JR specifically. If you don't read, then how do you get the info before doing Anki?
So that's where like those videos come in. It's like that bucket of resources. That's like the like learn bucket. So like the Anki is like the review, retain kind of bucket of resources. But yeah, so it's like watching Boards and Beyond or watching Sketchy. It's this they teach the same for the most part material that you learn in your classes. So like if that bucket for you is like going to classes, to like learn, you need to learn, bucket of whatever. So the resource for you could be like your in-person classes to like actually learn it, especially if you have like those in-house exams and stuff like that. But I like did not go to class, so for me it just was the like the third-party resources kind of stuff. You're muted, Alex.
Thank you. So how did we all pick a medical school? Anything you would have done different?
The only thing for me, well, towards the end, I started realizing for scholarships, and that helped me ultimately choose which place I was going. So that helped tremendously.
Sorry if I sound like I'm on my soapbox, but for me, I wanted a school that had a strong like value system and mission, and for me, Mayo fit the bill perfectly with the needs of the patient come first. As cheesy as that makes me sound, I wasn't paid by Mayo to say this, but so for me, it was a place that put its values first and knew what it wanted as an institution, a place that would open doors for me in the future for residency and beyond. Like I can't pretend like that wasn't a factor, like the standing of an academic institution and its reputation. And then like Emerald said, scholarships to play a role. So whoever gives you money, like definitely that's a consideration.
I guess for me, Michigan, yeah, same thing. I really felt like their mission fit well with mine, in terms of helping to prepare me to be the best, most compassionate clinician I can be. In addition to providing opportunities to do for like for research, for other academic things. I really wanted to go to a school that was had a lot of resources in terms of disability advocacy and education, which that was what I was I really wanted to do going into med school, and so Michigan had a lot of that. In addition, being close to home was important for me, and scholarships, of course, was a huge factor. So lots of things definitely go into the decision.
I think for me, I think like the biggest things like we kind of talked about in terms of the structure of the school are the pass fail, internal rankings, definitely checking all of that out. But then honestly, once you get past that, like you're gonna get a great education no matter where you go. Like it's all pretty similar. There's not a ton of like huge differentiating factors aside from obviously there are like higher ranked schools and things like that that might have different connections. But I do think that most schools are structured pretty similarly now, especially in the preclinical stuff. So it might not end up being that you're like nitpicking the curriculum apart, but more the geographic location, what does the patient population look like, what different types of places do you rotate at, and things like that. I think for me, it ended up boiling down to location and the patient population. I do really like Tufts like mission oriented struct like their mission and everything, and it is a very like diverse patient population. We're in the middle of a city, all of that. And then I also kind of considered like where do I want to spend my 20s, and some of my other options were more suburban or even rural, and I was like I think I would like to be in Boston. Seems like a good place to be a med student at this phase of my life. So I think there's a lot that goes into it, and it doesn't necessarily all have to be related to the actual like academics.
Yeah, also I can build on that again a little bit. Like I think truly what sets a school apart is like what Juliana said, like sort of its patient population, um, and its demographics. Like Mayo is gonna have a very different patient population. We're a tertiary care referral center. We have all these Uber specialists. That's gonna be very different from University of Vermont, focus on rural medicine versus Emory. You're in the inner city, lots of focus on underserved care and reaching out to minority populations. So those are going to be very different practice settings in which you grow and learn medicine, and you'll come out of each with a different perspective. So it's something to keep in mind.
Yeah, I definitely agree with everything that's been said. The only other thing that like played into my personal thing is just like my wife's family being close, but I think it just goes into this like the geography role and how you have to think about in what environments are you most likely to like succeed and do well. And like for some people, it's where you're close to family, and that could be like, I know if I'm close to my family, I'm going to feel the added support and just the peace of mind of being close or whatever, and I know I'm going to be able to excel the best in that situation. For some people it could be like, I'm born in Chicago or New York, super accustomed to like a big city, like that's where I feel comfortable, that's where I feel like the most myself. So I'm not going to go to Rochester, Minnesota, because I'm going to feel like what is happening. You don't want to put yourself in that like mental space, because then you won't be able to perform. So like thinking of like the things of like where you like the location where you feel like it's going to be able to set yourself up for success, whether that's location based on family, whatever, or based on just rural, urban, those kind of things. I think that plays a significant role because like Juliana said, everything's like standardized right now in terms of the actual education. And like by that, I mean, it's just watching those like sketchy videos. So like that's all that like the education is at this point. At least it's the majority of it, especially like pre-clerkship stuff. So, and even clerkship things, like medicine is a very standardized field, like there's like guidelines, and otherwise like, there'd be like poor care if like people were like doing things like differently, really. So even in clerkships, like you're going to be learning the same general way of like taking care of patients. Like I don't think that a medical student coming out of really any like ACGME like accredited institution is going to be like not know what they're doing. Like everybody will probably like know the same things. And again, we all watch the same videos. So I don't think that like curriculum is really going to be like that big of a thing. But potentially how the curriculum's graded, those kind of things could be different, but you're going to learn the same stuff no matter what.
For sure. So moving a little bit more into this residency preparation, how do you guys feel your medical experience plays into getting into your dream residency?
I can touch on this quick since I'm like, I guess the closest. I think that like networking is probably one of the biggest things that play a role in like achieving like the dream residency picture, whatever that is for you, specialty wise, local program wise, whatever. Because like we've been saying with things being pass fail, all these kind of things that we've been talking about throughout the meeting, like paper applications are looking very similar, and because of that, they're trying to use this like holistic kind of thing. But even like personal statements, like, you know, if everything is really just pass fail, everyone passes, it's still hard to like really push people out of like the file that you're considering based off their personal statement, or, you know, the like experiences that they put in there. So for the most part, the things that are being like weighed are like research is going to be one for certain specialties. Like if you don't do any extracurriculars, like that's probably not going to be good, but I mean, it's basically a box to check. But then the things that I'm getting at is like the network is actually like a pretty big deal, that I've realized. And you can achieve a strong network without having to go to like necessarily like prestigious colleges. If you're showing up at meetings, if you're like talking to like residents, and meetings like conferences, things like that, or even like meetings like this, like, you know, just any type of like social media things, and you're like engaging and you're like connecting with people, you can definitely build a network like that. Certain programs probably make it easier, because if, you know, for example, me going into orthopedics, and I know that my medical school sends a few people into orthopedics every year, like it's just like an automatic thing. Or if I like rotate somewhere and they have a former Mayo medical student, like there's an automatic bond kind of thing that can play in my favor. And it's like I'm realizing that those things matter way more than, you know, the like, you know, did I get a 255 or 265 on step? You know, even though that will probably end up being a slightly step two, bigger role or whatever, because it's one of the only things left. But I think in terms of like achieving that dream residency, really thinking of a place that's going to position you for like, I don't, if you know your long-term goals, like that makes it easier. Not many people do. Like not many people know they want to go on ortho or whatever, but like that's why some people, like I'm on the admission committee, and actually a few people ask me like, you know, how many people usually apply into like neurosurgery every year, because like they're already like thinking that. So like if you already kind of know, it's a fair thing, because like if every year a medical school is matching people very successfully in the field that you want to go to, like that's saying that as long as you come here and you follow in the same pathway that they did, you'll experience the same success. So those things matter. And then, yeah, again, if you can be in somewhere that can position you to grow the network, because network is crazy. These like, you know, phone calls and all this stuff that happens like behind the scenes is like, it's like a real thing. Even getting like away rotations and stuff. And sorry for harping on this, but I think, I don't know, I'm definitely trying to like unshade a lot of the stuff. It shouldn't be secret, but it definitely, I feel like it is. Like people make phone calls, like good and bad phone calls. And like which is like pretty crazy. But if you go to a place that has like, if I'm super interested in like neurosurgery and there's like a big name neurosurgeon like at this place, then, you know, if I go there making it my goal to be mentored by this person, like that, he can get you a residency position like very strongly, as long as like you don't like really drop the ball in something. Like the phone calls that he makes or she makes will be able to set you up in a very like strong position. So, you know, it's things that I didn't think about when I was applying to medical school. It kind of goes back to the previous question, but those are things like in hindsight I probably would think about. You know, that there's somebody, but again, you can find these people on social media, and it's just harder. It's easier if they're like at your program. But yeah, I guess considering some of these kind of like dark ways that residency admissions and stuff works, it's a reality. So I think it's important to know.
And then we just had a question come in. Are 3-year MD programs recommended? I'm not sure if anybody on the panel is in one, or wants to speak about that.
Well, I think all of us here are in 4-year MD programs, but I guess I can express an opinion on the matter if you're interested in hearing my opinion. I think, just like with undergrad and especially grad school, I don't see any reason to rush medical school. It's a time to really, grow into being a doctor and learning like part of bar along that journey. That being said, you save a year tuition, and you get to go to residency faster. So I mean, if you can do it, I'm on a 1.5-year free curriculum, and my gosh, it was fast. So I can't imagine how quick it would be on a 3-year curriculum. So you better be ready to start the race pretty quick. Then I'm sure clerkships are kind of condensed too. So I mean, if you can handle it and you're that person who likes the high pressure, like stakes and go, and you go get them, like go for it.
Yeah, our rural campus is a 3-year experience, and I will say it makes it, to me, from working with them, it makes it more challenging for them who are competing in like more competitive specialties, I guess I'll say, just because a lot of the programs are more geared toward primary care where you're not taking away rotations, stuff like that, and they kind of have to be very creative because you still have a bunch of required things that you have to get through in 3 years. And I think it's possible, I guess JR can speak to it. I mean, 4th year is very different. It's not like the rest of med school at all. I think there's a lot more flexibility than the other years that have more structure. So I don't think it's a bad thing. I think it's just different.
Yeah, I definitely agree with everything that's been said. Duke is one program that's pretty unique in that it's a 3-year med school curriculum, but they have a mandatory year of research. So it still like takes you 4 years of going through. But I talk pretty frequently with some of the med students there, and they're not the biggest fan. And I think it's something that like when there's changes, it's just most students really aren't the biggest fan at first because they're kind of in the season of like the school is just figuring it out and using them to figure it out kind of thing. So things usually aren't like fleshed out early on. But from what I've heard from their program or from them in relation to their program is they, I guess, actually have one of the lowest like average shelf exam, like for like the exam after your clerkships, like the lowest like average is Duke, like which is like you wouldn't expect that like compared to like other places in the country. And multiple of them like talk about this like very frankly because I spent a month there, I rotated there, and they were just like, yeah, we all like we never know what's going on in like these shelf exams, and like it's interesting to me. And so to Noah's point, like if things are rushed, you may feel like you might not be like mastering the material to the level that you may want to. And I know another program, University of Florida, has a 7-year undergrad med school kind of like combo thing. So those might be nice too, because I don't know like where you lose the year, because if it's like an undergrad year, you can like throw that away, it's fine. So like depending on like where you're at and learning about these kind of things, I think those are also something to consider. NYU has a really cool program where it's like 3 years of medical school, and then you get an automatic acceptance into the residency of your choice, which is like fantastic. It's a little scary because like you don't have the pressure of actually needing to know the stuff because you're not applying to residency, and you're like rushing through it, so you may not actually be like learning it great, and then like you're just an automatically like NYU resident. So like I mean it sounds sick, but like I don't know how like it works in the real world if they start intern year like feeling like deficient in certain areas, which is scary, because then it's like it actually matters. So I think there's a lot to consider. There's like really cool programs are now starting to like experiment more with this idea. in hindsight, I probably would look more into some of them, just like me personally, like thinking of trying to get through. Because again, I didn't like even go to class. So like in my mind, I just felt like I could watch all of these sketchy videos or all these Boards and Beyond videos and just like make it fast, right? I can watch a 15-minute Boards and Beyond video instead of like a 2-hour lecture and just like keep doing that over and over. And I probably could like, I don't know, save at least half a year, maybe. I don't know. But like everybody has their kind of like personal approach, just like knowing what yours is. And I think Noah did a great job of explaining like, you know, what personalities may be better suited towards one versus the other. And then we kind of touched on some potential downfalls of going through relatively quickly. But I'm excited to see what these programs start doing because it's a cool kind of thing. Because med school is expensive, so if you can save a year and then you get a year of salary earlier too, so it's like a win-win. That's kind of lit.
So I guess we'll wrap up with one final question. How did you guys figure out what you want to specialize in for those who have, I guess, have that figured out already?
For me, I just did a lot of shadowing to kind of get a better idea of what I want to do. And also, because I'm in my 3rd year now, as I'm doing my clerkships and things like that, I can kind of see like I want to specialize more on the pediatric side as well with foot and ankle. So that's been getting me a better idea. So it's like you still have kind of time to figure it out, but shadowing most definitely played a huge part.
So I can kind of speak to, because I don't exactly know what specialty yet, and like, you know, there's all this pressure to know early, and that's fine. Like, it's certainly helpful to know early, but if you don't have it figured out even like halfway through 3rd year, I mean, like, that's fine. But I can talk about sort of like ruling things out. I think one of the big things is medicine, surgery. Do you want to work with your hands? Do you not want to work with your hands? Inpatient, outpatient. Do you like really, really sick people? Do you like people who are a little bit healthier who can walk into your office? Those are like broad strokes that you can get a little feel for even during pre-clerkship. Just like in my experiences in the hospital, I'm like, do I want to see my patients on respirators or needing IV fluids or these things? Or do I want to deal with the follow-up stroke patient who might get a little bit of function back? So I think those are some bigger things. Do you like talking to patients? Do you not like talking to patients? If you like talking to patients, psychiatry is, you know, a great field for you. If not, radiology or pathology might be more of a better fit. So I mean, those are stereotypes, but they're stereotypes for a reason, because they're low-key kind of true. So those are some of the more important facets of your journey. Of even if you're not thinking about a particular specialty, think about broadly what setting you might want to practice in, what patient population you're attracted to, how much you like talking. Those are like 3 kind of things.
One other thing I would suggest as well is adding onto that is lifestyle. I think that's very, very important as well, especially for women. I think guys is more so easier for y'all, but yeah.
Yeah, that's definitely true. It's funny. My wife literally asked me, like, she's like, "Yeah, you have like a kid and stuff, but like, do like girls have kids when they're in school?" Because I see you don't do anything, and I know I'm the one doing everything. This is my wife talking, and she's right. So I was like, so like that's also like a realistic thing for sure. The only other thing that I'll say is like, you know, it was mentioned, I think both by like Noah and Emerald, to like a degree of like the more like exposure you get, the more you kind of get to like kind of suss stuff out and get your feel. But one like piece of advice that I was given is like, you find your people, find your specialty. And so it's like, if you really, because like personalities are very different, and you know, Noah mentioned it, like they're stereotypes, but they're stereotypes for a reason. You know, like they're very like you can expect if you walk into like an ortho OR, it's gonna feel different than walking into like even other ORs, like a neurosurgery OR, or like, you know, and it's definitely going to feel like the workroom, the ortho workroom is going to feel very different than the internal medicine workroom. You know, and some you may feel like, gosh, I want to go home. You know, like this is, you know, these ortho people are absolutely crazy. I'm exhausted. Why is everybody broing everybody? Like, I'm sick of it. Like, you know, that's perfect. And some people might be like, yo, this was a sick day, like, bro, like, and they might vibe with it or whatever. And programs are going to be different. You know, ultimately, programs are really trying to like have more of like diversity of, you know, thought as well, not just like from, you know, demographic standpoints. And so now things are becoming, I think, at least trying to become less so like every specialty in their own little box, their own like stereotyped box or whatever, but they still exist. And so you ultimately want to be like happy working with the people that you're working with in the environment that you're working with. And it's going to take a long time for those things to change. And if like you don't love the type of people that are in that field, the type of culture that resembles that field, like that's like the culture that you will experience at the meetings that you go to in your career, like the network of people that you're surrounded with, and you can't be burnt out by those kind of things. So I think a lot of the things that Emerald and Noah mentioned are probably like more important. Like if you love working with your hands, if you love MSK stuff, if you shadowed ortho and like you just felt like you really loved it, but some personalities like you don't mix with like at your institution, you know, take that with a grain of salt, take the personalities with a grain of salt, know that there'll be other people that you can resonate, and, you know, like prioritize those other things for sure ahead of personality. But I definitely think it's something to consider.
Just one more thing along the lines of the people, I do think that's super true. But I think it can go both ways. I think people can make a rotation, and I think people can break a rotation. So if you end up with a rotation where the people, maybe you like the material, but the people turned you off, it might be worth it to not throw the baby out with the bathwater just yet, and maybe do an elective or something with different people. Because, you know, it does make a difference. Half of what makes your job enjoyable is your coworkers or you know, the lack thereof. So definitely, you know, keep that in mind. Don't let somebody steal your joy if you think that you enjoy something.
Yeah. And to that point too, you know, you can go into a specialty and you can be the one to be that change, going through that path. Like if you a fan of like the culture, or may not have the best interactions with residents, fellows, attendings, you going through that, you can make the difference on whoever comes after you. So yeah, just keep that in mind.
Well, to wrap up, I just want to thank everyone for coming out tonight. I want to thank all of our panelists for taking time out of their day to answer questions. And then reminder, if you would like to stay on for the study with us, JR and some of us will be on here, and he will open it up so that you guys can kind of, I guess, join this podium floor and be able to ask whatever your questions and get work done and things like that. So thank you again for coming out tonight.